Okay, this is Hupdate, and this is our third vlog interview. I am interviewing today Sebastian Kann. He is a trained circus performer from, where'd you go? ENC, right?
Yes.
And you also now write about circus for Circus Now and other publications. And you're working as a choreographer and a dramaturge.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
So how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Thanks for chatting with me. So I have a bunch of questions for you, but I'll just start with a simple one. How did you get started in circus?
I guess like many circus artists, I went to a circus and fell in love with the idea of doing that. And then to pursue that, I started gymnastics. I was competing as a gymnast, and then auditioned for Circus Smirkus, which is a youth circus based out of Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ball kept rolling.
So everybody seems to have gone there. Is that where you met Josh Avener?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great.
Oh no, that's not true. Actually, I introduced Josh to Smirkus, but me and Josh met at gymnastics
Oh, okay.
when we were like 11 years old.
Oh, you guys go way back.
Yeah.
So what attracted you to aerial work to begin with?
Ooh, a combination of things. I mean, I think that the sort of I connected with the sensory aspect of it. Like I liked the way it felt more than other disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also connected well with just what my skills were turning out to be, which was more side of flexibility and form and creating form, and less on the side of like necessarily power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the idea of height was always intriguing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's about it. Yeah.
The risk aspect of it.
I wouldn't say the risk, but I think because eventually it doesn't feel like risk or danger anymore, right? But it's just the difference. It's not really for me about risk or danger, because eventually those things get kind of erased or it becomes normalized. But actually, it's once it becomes normalized, it's the alternative perspective that you have. Like, and I think I never had that for another discipline. Like, I was never good enough at handstands to erase the struggle, or like to normalize the struggle of holding a handstand and just live, or like see what it is to see the world through a handstand perspective. But in aerial, yeah, the height was about sort of seeing things in a new way, I guess.
That's really cool. So it's about your perspective as a performer that attracted you to it.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I was looking at your resume because you sent me like bio, and I see you've taught contortion and aerials at Code Arts, and you did choreography and sound design at ESAC, and you also did
kind of.
Okay.
That says on my CV. I mean, at Code Arts, I taught contortion, and I was an artistic advisor for aerialists.
Okay.
To be clear, and at ESAC in Brussels, I did an internship with someone who was directing a show, and I ended up being assistant choreographer and responsible for picking the music and designing the sound.
Oh, so it seems like there's a progression towards dance and dramaturgy and even directing. Is that something that always interested you, or did you discover it as you did circus?
Oh, well, no, I guess I discovered it as I did circus. But I think it's a function of just as a circus artist, you're always making your own work, right? Like you're always usually you're your own choreographer to a certain extent. And it was really at circus school at ENC that I started to also really live in that and find my voice in that, and figure that was something not only that I was good at, but that really was stimulating for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's because I was lucky enough to work with really good teachers that really pushed me to also have to articulate what I was doing and to justify what I was doing and really think things through. And yeah, so it's something that came through education for me, but now I guess would be primary. Like I have a much stronger connection to making than performing at the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting. And But that is kind of eventually where it leads a lot of people, I think, as they get older and more experienced, because it's something you can share with new people and help teach them, right?
Totally, yes, exactly.
Do you attribute your 4 languages to being a circus performer, or is that something you studied on your own?
That's also but just for full transparency, there's also an optimistic 4 languages.
Okay.
I'd say I have 2 for sure.
Okay. Dutch and English?
No, English and French.
Oh, English
I think.
and French.
But,
Okay.
yeah, the Dutch is a work in progress.
Okay.
A little bit. Yeah, I guess so. But obviously not because of the physical component of performing circus, but just because of the global infrastructure.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you shared a video that you made with Natalie Olenek called Net Piece 1, and would you mind if I link to that for...
Oh, no, please do. That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. And it's called Hometowns, and it seems to be about growing up in the suburbs, and I just wondered how you came across the idea for that project.
Well, it was a combination of things because it's a film project, right? It's not a promotional video for a show or something. We've had a lot of confusion with that. It's like that video is the piece.
Right.
And well, it's an idea that arose through collaboration. Like, I think initially me and Natalie were basically just brainstorming about things that we were asking ourselves, why do we agree so much? So we were like trying to figure out like what exactly those common grounds were.
I see.
And part of it that we ended up discovering or that ended up coming to light was that we both grew up in suburban environments, and that there was a kind of relation to that suburban environment that was not like a negative relation necessarily, but just kind of there's a bittersweetness and a feeling of being in 2 places at once, or a feeling of not totally being there, a feeling of kind of being halfway where you are, but also somewhere else. And yeah, and then it also came about that we wanted to collaborate with these 2 film people, Mark and Will. And Will Thompson and Mark Katz. And they also had a very particular practice and a particular aesthetic, and the thing kind of just grew. We didn't know at the beginning what it was going to be at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. Well, I was reading, you shared a paper with me, and I also read your Circus Now articles, which I want to talk to you about. And I've read what you wrote about metaphor and symbolism being something that kind of restricts dance and circus sometimes. And I wonder, when I saw net piece, I mean, I really wanted that net to mean something. I mean, isn't that just human nature?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, well, I guess maybe we should clarify for people watching, like what my position on metaphor or symbolism is.
Yeah, I was going to ask you more about that.
Yeah, so I think in the piece that you're referring to, what I was writing was essentially that that precisely like you say, metaphor and symbolism is something that we gravitate to as viewers. Like, it makes things understandable. But at the same time, that physical practices don't necessarily generate meaning that you can articulate in language. So, like, the difference between different circus tricks, if you try to talk about what they refer to, it's very hard. You can only really talk about the difference between circus tricks in terms of what they are. So then, when you make performing work, where I'm cued from the beginning to read it like each thing refers to something more than what it is. Like I come on stage and I'm not just me. I'm Mr. Jones. Like, then when things don't succeed in referring outside, I tend to just kind of like skip over it as a viewer, because it I'm just reading the signpost. I'm like jumping from signpost to signpost. And for me, I think that's problematic in circus because the actual circus is then the thing that you jump over.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Kind of. I got you about halfway through that, but I think as we talk about it more, it might
Yeah.
become more clear. And one of the things that you say in your Circus Now article is that like circus has been like a spectacle, and there's this trick that's part of the entertainment, and so you sort of see the trick as problematic in itself for helping contemporary circus get beyond just being entertainment or spectacle. Is that correct? Do you feel that way?
Well, I don't think that tricks are like bad or something.
No, I didn't mean that.
but I think that that we have to deal with them for sure. And I think that basically, like, circus technique is a body of knowledge that has so much meaning making potential, and I think that we tend to use that knowledge in a very small range of ways, both when it comes to the kinds of things the kinds of new tricks we try to make, tends to proceed in kind of like a vertical way, like getting harder and harder, or getting higher and higher, getting faster and faster, rather than a horizontal way, which is just about getting different, or about using different apparatuses, or about.
Oh, I see.
And then also, I think what I was saying in that Circus Now piece, which I wrote kind of a long time ago, if I remember correctly, was basically I was pointing at phrasing as the thing that makes tricks kind of always work in the same way. And what I mean by that is that just because of speeds and slownesses and because of staging mechanisms, every trick has this highlight, and so the rhythm of the thing kind of goes like, it's like blippy. And I think that there's lots of tricks that don't necessarily need to be staged with this climax. Like, I think that you can go into it and, for example, emphasize it's a dumb example, but like in tissue, if you like emphasize the rap and then do the drop really slow, you know,
that would break it up. That would change.
It just does It just does a different thing.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that example really helped. So, in order for contemporary circus to really resonate with people, we sort of have to stop expecting those stereotypes as an audience. That's another point that you hit on there, right? But I wonder, how can we help audiences like open up to circus being more like dance and more expressive? Is it the audience's fault, or is it the limitations of circus, or is it the artists who aren't trying the techniques that would help the audience make those adjustments?
Well, I don't want to put the blame on any person. I think maybe an inspirational thing to think about maybe is the idea that in artwork sometimes that interesting or groundbreaking art, I think, often is speaking to an audience that does not yet exist, but that the artwork somehow like creates or manifests.
Wow.
So, which is an idea from a lot of different thinkers about art. I would like to qualify that, first of all, by saying that's not my idea. That's Walter Benjamin's idea and Jacques Rancière's idea, and it's an idea that's been sort of like circulating in various forms throughout contemporary art history, I guess. But I would also like to qualify that by saying that the people programming work and the people running theaters do have a role to play in allowing the new to come into circus in America and everywhere, but circus in America particularly. And I think that oftentimes people running theaters underestimate the capacities of audiences.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true. I'm thinking now about your article, Disappearing Body, Circus Technique as Escape from Mimesis, which you shared with me. And you also approached the concept of physicality and say that it's hard for contemporary circus to really work if it has to be about not trying to represent the world with the art. What can the artist represent besides the world? Is it more like about emotions? I mean, if they're not pretending to be somebody or something, is it about expressing a feeling?
Yeah.
Is it about just showing that you're capable of doing something? And if that's the case, aren't we going back to the trick?
Yeah, well, I think a helpful way to think about it maybe is that perhaps it's interesting to start designing work where the meaning is not happening between things on stage, but the meaning is happening between the stage and the audience. So so the question then doesn't become what is this thing I'm looking at, but how does this thing relate to me as a spectator?
Oh yeah.
And in a more concrete way, I mean, what that looks like, I think, is not feeling like we need to justify what we're doing. And when I say we, no, I mean, I'm talking as a circus artist myself. So not feeling like we need to justify what we're doing by maybe explaining or like including this framework that makes it that makes one thing necessarily follow after another in a kind of articulable way, like I can describe why. But maybe the logic needs to be a logic that's more of tone or ambiance or feeling, or I wouldn't say emotion, but I guess the word is affect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it, if you were to compare what you're talking about to a type of art, for example, a visual art, like say historically, classic circus would be kind of like Impressionism or classic Greek art, what would contemporary circus be the equivalent to? Or the contemporary circus that you envision?
I think that's a good question. I think the current state of contemporary circus at the moment is something a lot like modern dance. So which saw itself as kind of like a break from like code, a break from ballet essentially, but eventually just kind of reinstated a new code, and was very concerned with human stories and with narrative and with kind of like dance being something that and also expressionist dance, something that allows us to express ourselves. And I hear a lot circus artists say, talk about their work as an expression of self. And as I sort of said a little bit in the paper I wrote a long time ago for Circus Now, that I think it's instructive or interesting to look at what happened to dance in the 60s when artists started reacting to this idea of movement or performance as self-expression or as emotional expression, and really trying to see what the elements of the medium do themselves. So it's a little bit, and it's confusing also for people. Sorry, you asked me like a nerdy question, so I'm going to give you a nerdy answer. It's important to distinguish the things that categorize postmodern dance, which is what I'm talking about. This thing in the '60s where,
like Martha Graham,
they started moving away from story dance. Modern dance, yeah. See, this is where it gets like really confusing. So, Martha Graham is modern dance, and Martha Graham is doing more like stories, narrative, emotional expression. People like Yvonne Rainer, Steve Paxton, Merce Cunningham, kind of. This is postmodern dance. And the confusing thing is postmodern dance and modern visual art have very similar philosophies behind them. So you can't really compare modernist painting and modern dance. Well, you can, but modernist painting and postmodern dance have something more in common, and the things that those two have in common are what seems like a logical progression for circus at the moment.
Hmm. Okay, I think I get it. So one thing I wanted to ask you is what circus-related projects are you working on now?
There's a group in Belgium called Circus Cartoon that I'm advising, although I don't have a large role in their work. I'm just kind of like coming in every so often and having coffee and chatting about what they're doing. But they're doing some interesting work. They're working with sort of large sacks of well, it's like these large sacks of cherry pits, and I think they have 16 of them. And their research question was, how much weight can we carry? Which turned out to be not very much because they, like, through doing this, they got like these sort of crazy repetitive strain injuries.
Ouch.
And so their work is evolving in a direction that is also dealing with that and dealing with kind of what it means to work now.
Oh, interesting.
So that's an interesting thing they're doing. But I'm just kind of like chatting to them about it. I'm not really so involved in terms of, and then otherwise in circus I'm running these dramaturgy workshops. I did one in Berlin, which was a really interesting and really cool, and it was great to see how involved people got and how much it felt like something that was needed in the scene, even here where there's quite a discourse and quite a lot going on. It really felt like people needed a forum to be able to like sit down and really talk about the way their work worked or might work or will work. I did this in Berlin, and I'm going to in Barcelona at the end of October, and I'm talking about finding a way of doing it in Amsterdam also. So, but mostly, I mean, I'm studying at the moment, so most of my time is devoted to my studies at
And
the
I was
moment.
going to ask you, you do write very academically about circus. Is this part of your PhD process that you're working
It's a
on?
master's. I'm working on a master's, yes.
Oh, okay. And have you noticed an increase worldwide in circus academically from master's and PhD programs?
Mm. Well, I know I was recently at a meeting because there's two circus schools in the Netherlands that are collaborating and proposing a new master's program in which they're calling choreography, which I find interesting, but it's called Masters in Choreography. The schools are Codarts and Fontis in Rotterdam and Tilburg. And I know also Isaac in Brussels have started a master's program. And there's this thing in Doch also called New Performative Practices, which circus artists can go to, as well as like a specialized circus masters. And also, yeah, so there's a lot going on that front. Also, I know that a lot of my friends from circus school, people of my generation, graduated and felt dissatisfied with the artistic baggage that we got at school.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of our capacity to articulate ourselves. So a lot of my peers are doing other kinds of formations now, or educations now, but actually not so many of them in these practice-based masters that are popping up in Europe, more in more straight-up academic settings. Because I think, well, coming out of ENC, I feel like we all had a physical practice that we can stand behind and that we're strong enough to develop on our own, and it's more the being able to deal with theories and concepts that was missing.
Mm-hmm.
So my very good friend Alma is doing a MA in psychoanalysis. Another of my friends, Claudel, is well, actually, she's doing a practice-based in theater direction. I think a lot of the people in my generation, yes, are going back to school in various ways.
And do you think that it's all to the aim of returning to the circus industry with new ideas and kind of transforming it, or is it more just that other interests have kind of sucked people into different arenas?
Yeah, well, the question of where to place work, I mean, you can talk about it from, like, I think that I will always make work from the perspective, maybe not always, but where I am right now, I think I would make work that would come from a circus perspective, or like I would feel like that was my grounding.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not the sort of like marketing term for it becomes circus, it doesn't really, I don't, I'm not on a mission in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that part of what I'm trying to do with the academic stuff is expand the ways that people can think about things still being circus, even if they don't look like what circus looks like now. So like, what I did in my my thesis paper, which I did send you, but I'll send you if you're interested, was I tried to redefine circus, and not in the sense of suggesting that it's the only definition or that my definition is right, but more as kind of a gesture of expansion, or trying to say like, look, more interesting, like, because all these people that are doing really, really interesting things in circus, the circus scene tends to say, oh no, you're not circus anymore, you're doing performance art, or you're doing dance, or you're doing this, or you're doing that. And I think it's really detrimental, because actually it's kind of a brain drain in a way, you know? It means that like the territory that is circus, everything that exceeds the territory doesn't expand the territory, it's just allowed to overflow into other things. And I think that if we want to expand or become more interesting or evolve or innovate, I think that we need to find ways of including the people that claim to be circus, regardless of how it looks, actually.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think that's an issue that pops up all the time. So it's really important to have that conversation, I think, especially amongst the creators.
I wanted to just add quickly that what I think is strange about circus, or is worth noticing about circus, is that we're one of the few art forms where you can still say that's not circus about something. Like, you definitely can't say to an installation artist, that is not an installation. Like, it's like art, it's always arguable.
Or music, like, you can't say that's not music.
You can't say that's not music. Like, everything, we've gotten to this point where everything is on limits, and what that means is that those art forms are kind of like elastic or expandable, and I think that's part of what the contemporary is, that there's this elasticity and ability to shift perspectives and an ability to shift definitions, and I think we're behind in that regard.
Yeah.
So I think that's something we're thinking about for circus.
I never thought of it like that before, but you just like made a light bulb go off in my head about it. And I have a quote from you I want to share. You say, I'm nerdy about circus, and I want to see it pushed to its limits. What can we do that we have not yet done? What tools can we use to help circus gain an articulate voice? And go on to compare circus to dance, delving into the central problem of the trick. Well, we get back to the trick thing, but I just like how you say, it kind of reminded me of what you just said about expanding its limits, how people question it and say, oh, that's not circus. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to get caught up into this sort of like also neoliberal logic of innovation and always the new and always the like that we always have to be exciting or something. But I think that there's a certain flexibility or adaptability that we need to.
Part of what you said popped out a little bit word-wise, but I think we heard most of it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry we had connection problems most of the time.
It's okay.
But it's been really fascinating talking to you. And I'd love to check in with you maybe in a year and see what you're working on next.
Yeah, that would be great. It would be my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, thanks for talking with me today.
Thank you very much. It's been awesome.